Nobody's here? Who am I? Where is this? Too many things are happening at once. The first thing I felt was the cold. Not just a chill, but a deep gnawing freeze that clawed its way to my chest, threatening to hollow me out from the inside. Encountering more of those things, panic surged, but didn't paralyze me. My body reacted on instinct, and before I knew it, I was smashing their skulls. The crunch of bone beneath my hands made my stomach turn, but the cold reminded me I didn't have time to dwell on it. Finally seeing some with clothes, I tore the tattered pieces from its body, ignoring the lifeless flesh beneath. It was disgusting, but the alternative was frostbite, or worse. I wrapped myself in the filthy rags and pressed forward, the teeth chattering so hard I thought they'd crack. The trailer park was a graveyard. Every door I opened led to the same sight: looted shelves, empty cupboards, and an occasional corpse, frozen solid in grotesque positions. But I couldn't stop searching. The cold gnawed at me, a constant reminder that I needed more clothes, more supplies, more warmth. Then came the gunshots, faint, distant, but real. Someone was alive out there. The sound was like a spark in the darkness, and I clung to it. I didn't think, I just moved. My feet were numb by the time I reached the edge of the trailer park, but the thought of warmth, of answers, drove me forward. I found a neighborhood buried under snowdrifts, the buildings standing like frozen tombstones. The cold made everything harder. My fingers felt like stone as I pried open doors and searched through the drawers. The zombies were stiff and slow, their frozen limbs cracking as they moved. Killing them wasn't difficult, but the chill never let me forget how close I was to their fate. By nightfall, I had found shelter in one of the larger homes. The walls were thin, and the wind still seeped in through the cracks, but it was better than the trailer. Taking refuge in one of the rooms, I realized I had scavenged enough supplies to hold up for a day or two. But unfortunately, the cold was still there, waiting just beyond these walls. It wasn't something I could escape. It was a predator, relentless and patient, and I knew it would claim me if I let my guard down. But here, I could breathe a little. I tried to think, to remember who I was and how I ended up here. The only thing that came to me was a name: John. I don't know if that's me, but tomorrow I figured it out. Tomorrow, I'll find answers. Morning came, though it was hard to tell through the dense gray clouds. The gunfire from yesterday still echoed in my mind. Someone was out there, and if they were alive, they might have answers, or warmth. Going west seemed as a good direction as any. I spent the morning looting nearby buildings. Most were barren, picked clean long before I arrived, but persistence paid off. Few books, some food here and there, and luckily an old map of the area. It wasn't detailed, but it gave me a better sense of the quarantine zone. I returned to the car I found yesterday, a pristine sedan half buried in the snow. The windows were frosted over, and the engine was surprisingly in perfect condition. When I hotwired it, the engine sputtered to life. The sound was jarring in the eerie silence of the frozen city, but it filled me with hope. The roads weren't the greatest, near packed with snow and abandoned vehicles, but it was faster than walking. That's when I found it, a generator, near the gate of the town. My breath got caught in my throat. If I could get this working, I could fight the cold, maybe even find some semblance of normalcy, but I didn't know how to use it. As I continued, I began to notice something strange about the bodies. Yesterday, in my desperation, I barely registered them, but today I saw it. Military uniforms, soldiers. Their weapons were gone, their gear stripped, but their presence raised questions I wasn't ready for. Clearing the checkpoint was exhausting. The zombies were more active here, their icy limbs less stiff in the midday chill. I fought hard, my body moving on instinct as I dodged and struck. One by one they fell until I carved out a small safe zone. I left the north and south exits open, a precaution in case I needed to make a quick escape. But the fight had drained me. My arms felt like lead, and every breath was a struggle against the icy air. As I rummaged through the checkpoint, I realized how unprepared I was for what lay beyond. If the checkpoint was this bad, what would I find further west? More zombies? More corpses? Or something worse? By the time the sun had begun to set, I knew I couldn't push on. I loaded all my supplies into the car and drove back to the house I spent in the previous night. It was good to be back in the somewhat warmth. I thought of the gunfire again. The distant sound of life in a world seemed utterly dead. Whoever was there, I hoped they were safe. Tomorrow, I would cross the checkpoint. Tomorrow, I would find out what waited on the other side. For now, all I could do was rest and brace myself for the dangers ahead. The storm had only grown worse overnight. Snow had piled high against the house, and the howling wind rattled the windows as if trying to claw its way in. But I couldn't let it stop me. Not today. I packed what little I needed and headed back to the checkpoint. The car was my lifeline. Every mile to carry me through the blizzard felt like borrowed time. But as I continued west, the path ahead became impossible. Abandoned vehicles clogged the way, their frozen shells locked in place by the snow. I had no choice but to continue on foot. The cold was merciless, each step through the snow stealing more of my strength. Then I saw it, evidence of a fight. Bloodstains painted in the snow, stark against the white, and the bodies were scattered. Some were frozen where they fell, but this wasn't in the quarantine zone. This was on the other side. My stomach twisted, and panic set in. If someone was out there, they might still be alive, or worse. They might have already been gone. The moment I exited the checkpoint, the storm seemed to explode around me. Snow whipped against the windshield, and the shadows of zombies loomed in the distance. They were everywhere now. Staggering through the drifts, drawn by the sound of the engine, I weaved through them, narrowly avoiding the abandoned cars and wreckage. I found a neighborhood up ahead. Its narrow streets winding like veins through the snow. My gut told me it might lead back to the battle site, but something else caught my eye. An abandoned truck sitting in the middle of the road, a trailer attached to the back. When it was over, I saw him. His gear told me he was probably the owner. I'm sorry. I was too late. He didn't hear me, of course. He couldn't. I stripped his backpack of supplies, knowing they would go to waste otherwise. It didn't feel right. None of this felt right. The storm was relentless as I drove back to the house, but my mind was louder than the blizzard. Could I have saved him? If I had moved faster yesterday, could I have made a difference? Or was I fooling myself into thinking I could save someone at all? When I reached home, I sat in silence, staring at the supplies I'd taken, and a new thought began to form. If I wanted to save lives, I needed more than luck. I needed a plan, a safe place, a shelter where others could survive and thrive. But then another idea crept into my mind, one I couldn't shake. What if I could do more? What if I could make a cure? Just my luck. I woke up coughing so hard it felt like my ribs were breaking. My chest burned with every breath, and my head throbbed like I had taken a crowbar to the skull. It might be better to set up shop near the fireplace. Another cough racked my body, loud and echoing. Then I heard some banging. My stomach sank. I forced myself up, grabbed my axe, and went to check it out. Maybe they heard me coughing, or maybe it was just blind luck. Either way, they were close enough to be a problem. The house was quiet again, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. The windows were so vulnerable, and this place wouldn't hold if more of them came. I needed to board them up, but that meant going back into the cold. My body begged me to stay indoors, but I grabbed my axe anyway and forced myself out. By the time I dragged the logs inside, my fingers were so numb I could barely feel them. I sawed the logs into planks and hammered them over the windows, sealing the house one board at a time. The work was slow and grueling, but I didn't stop until every window on the first floor was secure. Once the house was locked down, I grabbed my axe again, and I returned to the bitter cold, chopping the remaining trees into logs for the fireplace. By the time I had finished, I could barely stand. I dragged myself upstairs, moved a bed from one of the rooms down to the living room, and set up near the fireplace. Staying close to the heat seemed like my best chance to get out of the sickness. As the fire crackled and I buried myself under every blanket I could find, I forced myself to eat. The food was bland and cold, but it would have to do. Then I pulled out one of the books I had scavenged and tried to read. But my mind wouldn't stay on the words, it kept circling back to the same thoughts. The wooden boards wouldn't hold forever, not against a determined horde. The cold was only getting worse, and food and fuel wouldn't last. And then There was the cure. If I was serious about it, I need power, proper equipment, and a plan. The generator I found was a start, but it wouldn't be enough on its own. Morning came slowly, the pale light barely filtering through the boarded up windows. I got up feeling better than the day before. My fever had broken, and the coughing had mostly subsided. I had one goal today: organization. It hit me last night how much of a mess the house had become. Bags of loot were scattered upstairs, piled high with no rhyme or reason. If this was going to be my home, I needed to treat it like one. The first thing I had noticed was how prepared that survivor, the one whose gear I took, had been. There was enough canned food to last for weeks, maybe longer if I rationed properly. Weapons too, more than I realized. Guns, ammo, even seeds. I found another bag packed with medical supplies, antibiotics, painkillers, bandages, and even some surgical tools. It was almost too good to be true. As I laid it all out, I couldn't help but wonder what kind of person this survivor had been. Paranoid? A prepper? Maybe just someone who had the foresight I didn't. Then there were the crafting supplies. Nails, duct tape, wires, tools, even a small propane torch. Enough to build or repair just about anything. Seeing it all laid out gave me a strange sense of hope. Maybe I really could make something out of this place. I froze, my hand instinctively reaching for my trusty axe. Who was that? A woman? Her name was Tracy. She said she had been wandering for some days after getting separated from her group. She had found me by the smoke from the chimney. I didn't know what to think. Was she telling the truth? Was it some kind of setup? My gut told me to kick her out, but I couldn't ignore the desperation in her voice, or the fact that she looked half frozen. Against my better judgment, I offered her a room upstairs. Her relief was immediately followed by her professing her thanks. Tracy told me about her group. There were survivors looking to leave Louisville. She had gotten separated during the last blizzard and had been wandering ever since. The mention of other survivors made my stomach tighten. A group of strangers showing up here wasn't something I was ready for. The thought made my head spin. I had been thinking about creating a safe haven, but this was all happening too fast. If they had showed up here, would I have enough to share? Would they even listen to me? Or would they take what they wanted and leave me with nothing? If I wanted to keep this house secure, I couldn't wait for trouble to find me. I needed to be proactive. More defenses, more supplies, and maybe even a plan of what to do if her group came looking for her. I had woke up feeling drained, even though I had gotten some sleep. The fire had kept the chill at bay through the night, but it couldn't do anything for the weight in my chest. Yesterday's thoughts hung over me like the blizzard's clouds outside. If I wanted to keep this place secure, if I wanted to build something that mattered, I needed more supplies. And that in this apocalypse, anything that could go wrong would go wrong. I decided to stop fighting the uncertainty. Instead of trying to plan every detail, I would adapt, go with the flow. And that's where I saw him. He said his name was Edward and that he was passing through. When I asked where, he replied nowhere specifically. And I lowered my weapon and asked if he wanted to join me. To my surprise, he agreed without hesitation. On the way, I asked about his situation. He told me everything, how he lost his loved ones in the outbreak, how depression kept him rooted in the place for months, and how he finally managed to pull himself together enough to start traveling. The afternoon was spent trying to delegate tasks, but it didn't go as smoothly as I hoped. I had asked Edward to help clear the corpses from the perimeter, but he brought them inside by mistake. Meanwhile, Tracy flat out refused to cut down trees for firewood, muttering something about being too dangerous. Frustrated but determined, I took matters in my own hands. If I wanted them to follow, I needed to lead by example. I dragged the corpses outside, chopped enough firewood to last a few days. By the time I was done, the sun was dipping low and my muscles ached. I showed Edward to one of the empty rooms upstairs. Told him if anything gets cramped, we can always spread to the houses next door. As the day wound down, a strange feeling nagged at me. I pulled to check the houses next door. I grabbed my axe and made my way over. Inside, I found another survivor. He said his name was Alan, standing by a makeshift barricade near the front door. He didn't seem too surprised to see me, like he had been expecting someone to show up eventually. Alan had claimed the house for himself, but admitted it needed a lot of work to be livable. Tracy, Edward, Alan, how many more people would show up? How many more people could I take before everything collapsed? I woke to the feeling of being watched. Opening my eyes, I caught a glimpse of someone standing near my bed. Before I could say anything, they walked away. Moments later, Tracy entered the room. She seemed hesitant, which put me on edge immediately. She said that the person was Charlie, and from her old group. I didn't want to show my unease to Tracy though. Instead, I told her we need to do a sweep of the area. There's been a lot of new faces around here. We need to make sure that it's still safe. I geared up and decided to head out alone. My old sports car wasn't going to cut it anymore. If we were going to build a community, or even just survive with this many people, I needed something that could carry more than a couple of passengers. The blizzard had settled to a relentless, icy drizzle. As I trudged through the snow-covered streets, most vehicles I came across either too damaged or inaccessible, the doors frozen shut or batteries long dead. When I returned, Tracy and Edward were talking in the hallway. They stopped as soon as they saw me, which only made my discomfort grow. As we packed supplies for the sweep, Edward mentioned something odd. He's been wondering if the zombies migrate, like if left alone in an area for too long, do they just wander back in? We didn't have any evidence, but the idea stuck with me. It didn't take too long to find trouble. A small group of zombies had shuffled their way into the neighborhood, their dark, frostbitten skin blending in with the icy landscape. Further out, we checked the old checkpoint. There were only a few zombies lingering there, which seemed to confirm Edward's migration theory. The thought was troubling. Zombies could drift back into the cleared areas. Maintaining a safe perimeter would be an endless task. On the way back, we stopped by Alan's place. To my surprise, he wasn't alone. A woman named Ruth had joined him. Alan greeted us warmly, saying his house had plenty of space if we ever wanted to move in. I thanked him but declined. For now, my house was still my refuge. Too many people under one roof felt like too big of a task. Back at home, I settled by the fire with a book, letting the warmth seep into my bones. The day had been long, and the tension of watching Tracy, Edward, and now Charlie weighed on me. I set out to build a haven, but it was starting to feel like a balancing act. Every new survivor brought their own baggage, their own complications. How many more could I take in before things spiraled out of control? The morning felt different. The usual chatter, footsteps, or sounds of someone moving about were absent. It was the kind of silence that sank into your bones and whispered that something was wrong. When I reached the door, I found the answer. A zombie was clawing at it. Its frostbitten hands scraped against the wood, leaving faint, icy streaks behind. Without hesitation, I grabbed my axe and slipped out the back, moving around the house to deal with it. That's when I saw the horde. I swung my axe again and again, each hit reverberating through my arms. I tried shouting for help, but the howling wind and the moans of the zombies drowned out my voice. It was as if the world itself was conspiring to silence me. My muscles screamed for relief as I fought to hold them back, but they kept coming. Every time I thought I cleared enough, more shoveled in from the storm. When the last zombie fell, I almost collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. My body felt like it had been through the meat grinder, but the fight was over. I made my way to Alan's house, needing to check in. But when I got there, the place was empty. Not even a sign of their presence. The red hatchback that worked so hard to recover yesterday, gone. A pit formed in my stomach as I rushed back home. Inside, the cupboards and shelves I organized were ransacked. Nearly half of my supplies, food, medicine, and ammo were gone. I stood there, staring at the empty spaces where my provisions once were, as realization hit me like a sledgehammer. They had taken everything they could carry and left me to die. I couldn't sit still. The emotions roared inside me like a storm, threatening to consume me. So I forced myself to move. Grabbing my propane torch and mask, I headed to the nearby homes and began dismantling anything I could find. Sinks, dishwashers, laundry. The work was monotonous, mindless, and exactly what I needed. Each weld, each spark gave me a fleeting sense of control, distraction from the betrayal that gnawed at my thoughts. But no matter how much I worked, the emptiness lingered. By the time I had returned home, the sun had dipped below the horizon, and the cold had deepened. Normally I'd light the fire, cook something, try to make the space feel less desolate. But tonight, I couldn't bring myself to do it. The betrayal still hung heavy on my mind, but I couldn't let myself sit around and wallow in it. Not anymore. If I stayed in this headspace, I wouldn't survive long enough to do anything about it. I got up, took stock of what was left. The house felt emptier without the others, quieter, colder. I decided to head out on foot, not wanting to risk my car. The snowstorm was relentless, but I figured I could push through. Maybe there'd be something left at the checkpoint. Maybe I could find food beyond it. Maybe I could stop feeling like I was just wasting away here. My fingers and toes started to go numb, the early signs of hypothermia setting in. Eventually, my body forced me to relent, and I had no choice but to turn back. Back home, the silence hit me again, heavier than before. A sneeze broke through the stillness. Of course. This was the price of my carelessness. What was the point of all this? The house, the supplies, the fighting. It all felt meaningless in the face of everything I had lost. Maybe tomorrow would be better. Maybe it wouldn't. I didn't know. I wasn't sure I cared. For now, all I could do was survive the night. The morning felt different. Lighter, maybe? Yesterday still clung to me, but it wasn't as crushing. I wasn't drowning in my sorrow anymore. I was still sick, still worn down, but I wasn't useless. I could do something today, even if it was small. The first thing on the list, firewood. Oh yeah, the generator. I stashed this back here when I had first brought it home, but without a manual, it was nothing more than a glorified hunk of metal. But if I could get my hands on a manual, I could get it running. And if I got it running, then I would have power. That's good. That's a good idea. Maybe I should go for an outing. I wasn't about to risk my sports car on a supply run. It was fast, sure, but I'd rather not risk it. I need something sturdy, but also disposable. For the first time in a while, I felt something close to hope. It was fragile, but I'm holding on to it. I had a list of things that I needed, but if I wanted to make sure most of it was done, I needed to focus. 3 things first: water, wood, metal. Simple. But if I didn't make it back, at least someone else could use them. Water was the easiest to take care of. I had some pots filled with clean drinking water, but I needed a little bit more. Wood was next. At this point, it's self-explanatory why I need it. The ache in my arms from yesterday's work hadn't fully faded, but I pushed through. Then there was the metal. I intended to use it to beef up the cars and the house, but we'll see if I have enough propane for that. Every little bit counts though. As I worked, my mind drifted. I had woken up alone in the snow, half dead and without a name I could trust. No memories, no purpose, just survival. Now, I had built something. A home, however temporary. A plan, however uncertain. A mission, however impossible. I had trusted people, I had lost people, and somewhere in between, I had learned something important. Too much trust makes you vulnerable, but complete isolation will kill you just the same. A mix of emotions churned inside me. Anxiety, excitement, uncertainty. Today was the day. I was finally leaving the quarantine zone. Taking deep breaths, I steadied myself. No room for doubt. If I got too riled up, I'd make mistakes, and mistakes got people killed. Instead, I needed to focus. Gear up, load the car, get moving. The snow had settled just enough to make driving easier, and for the first time in a while, I could see clearly. The open road stretched ahead, lined with frozen corpses and abandoned cars. The dead still wandered, but they were easy enough to dodge. pulled up to an old gas station, but I wasn't alone. The horde loomed behind me, drawn by the sound of my engine. I had to move fast. With the dead handled, I looted quickly. Food, a gas can, a skill magazine. Not for generators though, because that would be too easy. I didn't have time to be frustrated. There was more work to do. The houses ahead were a problem. Too many zombies, too many risks. But if I had come this far, I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I picked my ground carefully, leaning smaller groups away before taking them down. My axe carved through the frozen flesh. My boots crushed brittle bones. I was running on adrenaline now, every instinct focused on survival. One by one, the houses became accessible. I looted quickly. Tools, food, water, books, supplies that would keep me going for weeks. My trunk filled up fast, and despite everything, I felt satisfied. I looked down at my axe, still sharp despite the abuse. It had been a good haul, but something still gnawed at me. The generator magazine. The one thing I needed most was still missing. There's always tomorrow. The routine had become predictable. Sneak past the undead, fight the ones that see me, loot when it's safe, over and over again. Easy steps, but even easy steps could get you killed if you lost focus. Moving with precision, I executed every action as if it was second nature. I'm severely outnumbered, but the cold had slowed the zombies, making them sluggish. House by house, I scavenged. More food, more tools, more comfort. Soon, reality hit me. My bag was stuffed. The trunk of my car was already full from yesterday. And as much as I wanted to stay out here, I needed to return home sooner rather than later. I found it. The generator manual. No more darkness, no more freezing nights. Not wasting a second, grabbing my stuff, and I rushed back to the car. The roads were quiet, the snow reflecting the soft glow of the setting sun. The weight of the past days, the betrayal, the fights, the exhaustion felt distant now. This was a win. Finally, a win. Back home, there was no hesitation. I lit a fire, warming my frozen hands as I flipped through the pages. The pages were worn, but the knowledge was invaluable. After, I grabbed my spare bottles of gasoline and got to work. Hooked up the generator, a little rumble, and then a flicker. Boom. Light. For the first time in what felt like forever, my home was warm. For once, I wasn't just surviving, I'm finally thriving. It almost felt like a dream, For the first time since waking up in this frozen nightmare, I'm truly comfortable. This house wasn't just a shelter anymore. It was functional, warm, lit, a home. So many new possibilities opened up. But hold on, wait a sec. The generator was a luxury, but it's also a liability. I only have a couple days of fuel. Eventually I'll need to go get more. Not to mention, power meant attention. If anybody passed by and saw the light, they might come knocking, or worse, they might come taking, and I needed to be ready. But that's for another day. Today was a day for rest, because right now, in this moment, I had beaten this blasted cryogenic winter.